Picture this. You're dissed at the front gate of your own precinct, and 5 minutes later you've got an entire conference room pin-drop silent like magic. That's Commander Reed for you. At her very first staff meeting, instead of shuffling chairs or tweaking schedules, she clicks a remote. Up pops a grainy black and white photo. Officer James Reed, my brother, followed by the tagline, "Character is who you are when no one's watching." That's all it takes to turn swagger into humbled stares. Want to see how a black woman turns condescension into a masterclass on integrity and accountability? Hit like, share this story, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss a single twist in her quest to reform the badge from within. In the opening, we saw 3 officers try to push their new commander aside before she'd even stepped through the front door, and now it all comes alive in vivid detail. That morning, with the sun barely peeking over the clouds, Jordan Vale strolled out of her sedan at the side entrance of Cedar Falls County Precinct. She closed the door with a soft click, moving slowly, deliberately as if she'd carried this burden 100 times before. Instead of her uniform, she wore charcoal slacks and a simple blouse, her badge tucked out of sight in her jacket pocket. In her hand was a single, sealed envelope, stamped, "Official Business." She paused in the staff parking lot, glanced up at the weathered brick facade, then checked her phone. Records transfer in 5 minutes. Tops. The air was so still you could almost hear the precinct holding its breath. Then 60 seconds later a trio of officers appeared. A square-jawed veteran, a stern-looking female cop with platinum hair, and a nervous rookie clutching a styrofoam coffee cup. They closed in on her like predators circling prey. "Restricted area," the white officer barked, finger hovering near his holster. "Badge and credentials now." His gaze flicked from her polished loafers up to the envelope. Jordan stood perfectly still, her calm so absolute it cut through their posturing. "I'm waiting on a records transfer," she said evenly. "Official business." They bristled, the rookie's hand trembled, the blonde officer smirked, taunting. "A cousin work here? Because we don't do surprise visits." "Who?" Jordan slid the envelope from her inner pocket, held it out at eye level, not aggressively, just plainly, and let them read her credentials. The laminated ID gleamed under the lot lights. The veteran officer snorted and waved her off. 10 seconds to get off this property, or we'll tow you in for trespassing." She tucked the badge away and met his stare. "I've done nothing wrong," she replied softly. He lunged forward, menace in his voice. "Refuse a lawful order, that's detainment. Your choice." She shifted her gaze to each of them in turn, her silence heavier than any shout. "I'll go inside now," she said. "You'll understand soon enough." Without flinching, she walked past them as if they didn't exist. The rookie watched her go, coffee forgotten, and the others, stripped of their bravado, simply let her pass. At 8 a.m. sharp, the main conference room doors swung open, and 25 officers fell silent. Commander Vale, now in full uniform, stepped in without a file or folder, only a remote control in her hand and an unreadable expression on her face. She cleared her throat. "I'm Commander Vale. Effective today, I lead this precinct." No one dared speak. She clicked the remote. Behind her appeared a grainy photo of a young black officer, beside a patrol car, her own brother. The room shifted, charged with a truth they'd never heard before. The moment the lobby doors swung open behind her, the 3 officers stiffened, forming an invisible cordon across Jordan's path. Daltani's square jaw set like granite stepped forward, hand hovering at his holster. "Badge and credentials, now," he barked, voice echoing off the brick walls. His tone brooked no argument. Beside him, Jenna Marks flicked a disdainful glance at Jordan's plain slacks and blouse. "No uniform, no real badgino entry," she sneered. Cross, the rookie, hovered uncertainly, glancing between his colleagues and the woman who refused to back down. Jordan lowered her arm, unpocketed her ID, and held it out calmly. The laminated card caught the morning light, the department seal, her name, her rank. Dalton snatched it, squinted at the fine print, then tossed it back as though it were an annoyance. "That's not enough," he grumbled. "I want your orders. I want your captain." Jenna laughed, hinge sharp. "You're on your own, sweetie." Silence stretched. Jordan didn't flinch. She slipped the badge into her pocket, and met Dalton's glare with an icy calm that cut deeper than any shout. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, voice low but steely. "I'm here on official business. Stop wasting my time." Dalton's nostrils flared. "Step off this lot before I have you removed for trespassing." His swagger fell flat against her stillness. He barked again, louder. "Will you comply, or do I call security?" Jordan inclined her head, almost imperceptibly. "I'll go inside now," she replied quietly. "You'll understand soon enough." Then she turned on her heel and strode past them as if the air around them were empty space. Dalton's shout ricocheted off the garage walls. "Hey! You can't just walk away from an order!" Jenna folded her arms smugly. Cross's coffee cup trembled in his hand. His eyes, filled with doubt, tracked the commander's retreating back. He wanted to call out, to protest, but even his breath caught in his throat. Inside, the lobby fell. Silent security cameras tracked Jordan's every step, from her polished flats to the envelope she carried. As she reached the main hall, uniformed officers glanced up, jaws clenched, murmurs rippling around the room like a gathering storm. Peyton lingered at the edge of the cluster, still holding that cup. His gaze softened as he watched Jordan lift her chin, plant her shoulders, then clasp the envelope to her chest. For a heartbeat, he hesitated between loyalty to his peers and loyalty to the truth staring him in the face. The barrier between compliance and conscience wavered. Jordan passed through the lobby doors, the envelope tucked safely under her arm, and left behind a tableau of officers frozen in place, shaken by the authority of her silence, haunted by the question she'd left hanging in the air. Who really owns this badge? Jordan walked straight into the spacious conference room where 25 officers stood at attention. She stopped in the center, donned her crisp uniform, and straightened her gleaming badge under the ceiling lights. Instantly, the room fell silent, no murmurs, just the sound of collective breath held. Commander Vale drew a calm, measured breath, let her gaze sweep across the room, then spoke with quiet authority. "I'm Commander Jordan Vale. As of today, I'm leading this precinct." She didn't mention shift schedules or office renovations. She dove right into core issues. "We're more than badge wearers," she emphasized. "We're stewards of culture, accountability, and transparency for the community." Behind her, a black and white photo appeared on the screen. Her brother, a model officer, unjustly punished for defending a colleague. Eyes around the room flickered with recognition and sorrow, reminders of the cost of standing up for what's right. Jordan clicked to the next slide. "Honor is what you are when no one's watching." Not a single voice dared to challenge her. Only a few guilty glances passed among the ranks. She let the words hang in the air, heavy with meaning, before posing the pivotal question. If someone watched your body language for 10 minutes, what would they believe about this department's values? The room grew even quieter, as if every inhale and exhale were conscious choices. Those who had once prided themselves on unquestioned authority now found themselves confronted by their own unspoken truths. In that moment, they realized that the real badge of honor wasn't on their chest but in their conduct when no one else was looking. Moments after Commander Vale's challenge, the tension in the conference room lingered like a held breath. As the officers shifted uncomfortably, Officer Peyton Cross quietly rose from the back row. His steps were tentative, almost reluctant, but each one carried the weight of confession. He approached the front and cleared his throat, a small sound that resonated in the heavy silence. When he finally looked up, his eyes met Jordan's with a vulnerable honesty. "Commander," he began, voice low. "I was there that morning. I saw what happened outside the lot, heard the insults. I froze. I did nothing." Jordan turned fully to face him, her expression calm but piercing. She didn't raise her voice or scold him. Instead, she pointed out the deeper truth. "You didn't shout. You didn't push them back. But you also didn't stop them, and that Peyton is the real failure." The room held still as her words sank in. Peyton's shoulders slumped, shame and relief mingling on his face. He swallowed hard. "I froze," he admitted. "I thought keeping my head down would make it go away. It didn't. Commander, I want to set it right. I'll speak up next time." Without another word, Jordan nodded unseen affirmation, not a pardon. "Learn to use your voice," she said quietly. "Silence can speak louder than any accusation." Peyton exhaled and straightened his posture, a new determination in his stance. As he turned to leave, the resolve in his step was unmistakable. This officer, once complicit in silence, was now committed to truth. Behind him, Bianca Torres, the commander's longtime assistant, watched with steady eyes. Once the door closed, she slipped from her seat and crossed to Jordan's side. As Peyton exited the conference room, Bianca quietly inserted a small USB drive into her laptop and began copying the security footage, meticulously logging timestamps and actions. She cataloged every detail, ensuring that no snippet of video would ever vanish. In that hush of accountability, the precinct's new chapter was being written not with raised voices or dramatic clashes, but with the subtler power of confession, commitment, and careful record-keeping. Peyton's promise to break the silence, combined with Bianca's silent safeguarding of evidence, set the stage for systemic change, one honest voice and one irrefutable recording at a time. Still reeling from Peyton's confession, news of the clip showing Officer Dalton's abuse of the newly appointed commander spread like wildfire across social media. The hashtag #JusticeHasNoBlindfold exploded, comments pouring in, "When will the cops finally be held accountable? Enough with the silence!" Under mounting public pressure, the Cedar Falls County Police Department was forced to issue a statement. Dalton was immediately suspended pending an internal disciplinary hearing, and an investigation into abuse of authority and mistreatment of civilians was launched. But the crackdown didn't stop there. The ADA's office, led by Marcus Hale, received urgent orders from above to press criminal charges against Officer Jonathan Bryant for assaulting a public official. A swift legal operation was mobilized, sending a clear message: no one is above the law. On Jordan's desk, emails flooded in demanding evidence collection, camera footage retrieval, and secure backups of all interrogation logs. Amid this flurry, Jordan remembered the old case file of her father, Martin Bradford, who had been unlawfully detained by Bryant back in 2003. She pored over every complaint form, compared it to the extracted camera logs, and cross-referenced it with Peyton's and Raymond Ellis's testimonies. 16 years earlier, her father's record read only obstruction of traffic and uncooperative behavior, then was swiftly closed. Now, every illegal detail was laid bare. No lawful arrest warrant, no verified witnesses, unexplained bruises on Mr. Bradford's wrists. In a private meeting with ADA Hale, Jordan cut straight to the chase. "Mr. Hale," she began, her voice calm but razor-sharp, "I have documents proving you were instructed by superiors to keep quiet and stall the investigation into my father's case. How do you explain that?" Hale's eyes widened as he tried to steady himself before Jordan's unwavering gaze extinguished any escape. 2 decades of cover-ups have consequences. Unless you take responsibility, the public will never trust justice here. The confrontation unfolded in a silence so tense it left everyone breathless. Old 2003 records and fresh investigative files were laid side by side, each a spear aimed at those who chose silence. By the meeting's end, Marcus Hale could no longer ignore his duty. His footsteps out of the boardroom were heavy with the weight of the cover-up he had once protected. Yet Jordan, her resolve unshaken, instilled in everyone present the unwavering belief that, however dark the past, justice is always waiting to be awakened. With the dust barely settled from her private showdown with Marcus Hale, Jordan Vale wasted no time scheduling an unprecedented public hearing. The grand jury room buzzed as word spread. 8 victims of police overreach would take the stand one by one. First came Raymond Ellis, a soft-spoken retiree whose life unraveled after a single rough pull from Officer Bryant. He spoke haltingly of the bruise that marked his ribs, the hospital bill that swallowed his savings, and the eviction notice slipped under his door. As his frail fingers traced the scar still faint on his side, the video played on a giant screen, Ellis being yanked out of his car, arms twisted so hard he nearly blacked out. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Next was Maya Jordan, a university freshman whose voice cracked as she described 48 hours in a patrol car's back seat, left fed only water and cold metal. She showed the faded welts on her wrists where the zip ties bit into her flesh. The courtroom lights dimmed as slow-motion footage rolled. Her frantic knocks on the partition, the hollow echo of her pleas unanswered. A collective gasp echoed off the walls. Devin Blake followed, still haunted by flashbacks of a traffic stop gone wrong, asymmetrical scars framing one eye. He fought tears, recounting how Bryant laughed as he cuffed him for resisting, then threatened him with a point-blank search of his phone records. The defense table sat frozen. Their mitigation script lay in tatters. One by one, the 5 remaining witnesses crystallized a mosaic of cruelty. Elena Vasquez, bruised after complaining about a rude shove. Michael Turner, whose throat was slashed by a baton because he looked suspicious. Chris Nguyen, a young teacher detained for hours after mistaken identity. Tamika Johnson, forced to write a confession she never read. And Samira Ali, whose elderly mother was cuffed for asking, "Why?" They presented photos of their injuries, hospital reports, and grainy cell phone clips. As each testimony ended, the volume of injustice swelled. Jurors exchanged stunned glances. Reporters dashed for notepads. Even the most hardened officers toward the back of the room shifted in their seats. The defense attorneys, once so confident, now searched for any shred of doubt, but there was none to find. Every story overlapped the next, painting a relentless pattern of abuse and cover-up. Jordan watched from the bench, her expression unreadable, yet resolute. When the last witness finished, she tapped the gavel for order, then spoke with measured authority. "You have all seen the same truth we have long ignored. Let no one say again that justice is blind to abuse." The silence that followed was not empty, it quivered with possibility. In that moment, the wall of silence shielding wrongdoing had been shattered, and the entire department knew it. Riding the wave of public outrage from the courtroom testimonies, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a sweeping, multi-agency probe into the precinct's conduct. Within days, federal agents from the Civil Rights Division and the FBI descended on Cedar Falls County. They unsealed indictments charging Jonathan Bryant with civil rights violations and obstruction of justice, and they arrested former ADA Marcus Hale for retaliation against whistleblowers. Suddenly, a who's who of department brass from the police chief to the head of internal affairs found themselves served with subpoenas and compelled to testify under oath. At the center of the storm stood Commander Jordan Vale, elevated from new arrival to indispensable witness. In a packed DOJ hearing room, she laid bare the rusted network of cover-ups she'd meticulously documented. Hundreds of internal emails directing case delays, spreadsheets tracking which complaints were quietly purged, and logs showing who authorized each suppression. As Jordan flipped through her exhibit screenshots of chain-of-command memos, audio transcripts of off-the-record hallway counsel, she watched hardened prosecutors exchange glances. No longer could anyone claim ignorance. Her testimony didn't just indict individuals. It illuminated how an entrenched culture of protection shielded repeated abuses for decades. News cameras captured her calm clarity as she described email threads instructing staff to keep this quietly internal and avoid headline risk. Behind her, a screen displayed side-by-side comparisons of official case file, some version whitewashed, the other raw with citizen video evidence. That night, social media erupted with the hashtag #JusticeSeesAll, as activists and civic groups seized on Jordan's disclosures to demand nationwide reform. Calls for mandatory, untamperable body cams soared in Congress. Governors and mayors unveiled new bills to strengthen independent oversight boards. Even police unions once defensive publicly backed transparent camera legislation in a bid to reclaim credibility. Across the country, riverbank rallies and town hall debates swelled. In Chicago, Seattle, and Miami, citizens learned Cedar Falls County's story and saw their own neighborhoods in it. Lawmakers fast-tracked bills requiring real-time camera uploads, severe penalties for data deletion, and guaranteed third-party audits. Within weeks, at least 12 states had introduced or passed such measures. Back in Washington, Jordan's role as key DOJ cooperating witness cemented her reputation as a reform champion. Yet she refused interviews and accolades, insisting instead that this isn't about one precinct, it's about every community that's been silenced. As the national push for police accountability surged forward, Commander Vale quietly returned to Cedar Falls County, her resolve unshaken. The system could no longer loot its own shield in darkness. Now, at long last, the light was unstoppable. After weeks of high-stakes testimony and damning evidence, Jonathan Bryant finally rose in the federal courtroom and entered a guilty plea to assaulting a public official, abuse of power, and racially motivated misconduct. The judge, unmoved by last-minute appeals, handed down a sentence of 15 years in federal prison, with zero possibility of early release and the complete forfeit of his public pension. A hush fell over the gallery as Bryant's head bowed, the gravity of accountability settling in. Power cannot endure when justice refuses to be blind. Outside, news vans and citizens alike stood in stunned silence, not from fear but from the hard truth they'd witnessed. Social media feeds overflowed with applause for a system finally holding one of its own to account. Editorials lauded the sentence as a watershed moment in civil rights enforcement, while community leaders hailed it as proof that no badge grants immunity from the rule of law. In the midst of it all, Commander Jordan Vale, bearing the faint scars of that first assault, stood firm in her conviction. Truth must triumph. Her steady leadership had guided the precinct from shame to redemption, transforming a fractured department into a beacon of reform. As reporters circled, she declined personal praise, insisting instead on focusing attention back on the victims whose courage had sparked the change. Though the system remained fragile, Jordan's unwavering stance provided the final spark of hope. In her eyes, this conviction was more than a verdict. It was a promise kept to every person who ever suffered in silence. And as Bryant was led away in cuffs, the message resounded clearly. Justice may bend under pressure, but it will never break when met with unflinching resolve. The story leaves a profound message. Honor and persistence can overthrow even the most entrenched bureaucracies. Jordan didn't throw punches or roar with authority. She chose silence, walked through humiliation, and acted precisely when it mattered to expose the truth. Real power doesn't come from rank or badges, but from the courage to stand up in the storm when everyone else bows their heads. One voice, even alone, can spark a wave of change if its bearer has the bravery to own responsibility and speak truth. Cultural transformation within a police force doesn't begin with mandates on paper but with individuals willing to lead by example, those unafraid of solitude when standing for what's right. When the system demands cover-ups, they demand transparency. When power corrupts, they demand justice. Their example is a beacon for future generations. Justice doesn't always need a loud shout, but sometimes a quiet, steadfast act that awakens consciences and reshapes an environment long accustomed to silence. In the fight for justice, personal courage remains the most potent weapon. A year has passed since Jordan Vale first stepped through the doors of the Cedar Falls County Station badge, gleaming and silence unshaken, and the change has been nothing short of remarkable. First came the new transparency policy. Every officer now wears a body cam streaming live back to headquarters, with no manual shutoff or tampering allowed. Justice has no blindfold isn't just a trending hashtag online, it's a working doctrine, taught in every in-service training class and displayed prominently in the briefing room. Peyton Cross, the young officer who once trembled clutching his coffee, has since been promoted to lieutenant and now oversees the Speak Up and Act training for the entire department. He often recounts how that quiet moment outside the station woke him from complacency. New recruits hear his story as legend. If you can't do something heroic, at least don't stand mute. Bianca Torres now heads internal affairs, leading a legal team that processes every complaint, big or small, with zero tolerance. Martin Bradford's old file was reopened. He received a public exoneration and compensation, and the local black community finally felt seen rather than sidelined. Of course, deep change doesn't happen without pushback. A few local columnists still question whether cameras slow down urgent response times, but the moment a serious incident is captured on film, even the skeptics fall silent before the evidence. Jordan Vale, now Deputy Regional Security Director, still returns to Cedar Falls County for key meetings. She remains quiet and composed, but those steel-sharp eyes of her sensei, the stillness outside the station, have become a beacon. Doing right is rarely easy, but always necessary. And a year on, beneath the glow of the rising sun against the precinct's red brick walls, The new plaque reads on in polished letters, "Transparency builds trust."